everybody, and welcome back. We've been away for a while. Jake, do you want to start us off?
Sure, I'm Jake,
And I'm Cam.
and we've got issues. This is just going to
Y-
be a short pickup uh, issue, or at rather pick me up, because that's what's been keeping me up afloat is actually reading some of these comic books.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, we've kind of been pretty busy with life stuff. So, yeah, we had a little bit of a break, but it's great to be back here behind the camera recording with you, Jake. And so we both agreed that we'd have a bit of a shorter one today. We will be doing a review soon. So definitely stay tuned to that. We have not left in any capacity. We're still this channel is still very much alive, and we've got so much more to talk about. But life gets in the way sometimes, and I don't need to tell you guys that time is limited, especially when you have the kind of responsibilities that I guess most grown-ups do. So anyway,
Yep, you
we're
got
going
that
to do our
right.
usual pickups. So this just for anybody who's a new viewer. First of all, thank you for tuning in, and secondly, our pickups are not things that we have recently bought or purchased, as many pickup videos on YouTube generally entail. For us, it's more about things that we perhaps currently have in our collections, which you can see a little bit of behind me, or it might be something that you found recently that you picked up and read. It's things we've read, not so much. This is something I bought and it's new. So Jake, I'm going to let you start off today, and then
Okay,
I'll jump in. So yeah,
okay, I'll
the
go
floor's
have Luke.
yours.
Luke's gonna walk over here, and okay, this was a fun one. And on my recent trip to one of my comic book stores with my brother, I happened across JLA Avengers
Okay.
by Kurt Busiek and the
Yeah.
legendary George Perez. Okay.
Oh,
Um,
nice.
and this is not my original copy. I picked this up because um, I had left this uh, at my dad's prior to one of my trips overseas, and he lost them. So I managed to pick up the first two issues, and I might have the three and four somewhere because I think these are the only ones I left with him. So this is just replenishing my collection with the originals. These are the original printings of them, and I was able to find them at a, well, fairly reasonable price from my comic store.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. So, is this a crossover? I mean, what exactly is this? Because I've not heard of it. I
So
mean, it's
this
a
is
hell of a team up, Busick
this is
and
oh yeah,
Perez.
this is really actually very sought after in its collected forms. It's very hard to find them here in the US right now as a collection because I've been trying to find them as a
Yeah.
collected work of four issues, right? Um, this is actually like a cult, not a cult thing because like George Perez is really really legendary as a comic books artist,
Mm.
but this is one of his main works. It really is like you could compare it to like Crisis on Infinite Earths. It's that
Mm.
fun. It's that kind of um, it's like I like some of the things that I love about comics. It's like a love letter to comics, especially when you grow up with Marvel and DC. It's a love letter to Marvel and DC. So um, it's yeah, it's fairly popular, and it was in the early 2000s that this was done. And what's really cool is like they actually used the the iterations of the teams that were current during that day. So the rosters of the teams will reflect um, those, pretty much the rosters of the current teams back then in 2003. And as a coincidence, George Perez was also doing Avengers at that time.
Okay.
So this was really a cool thing for him to do.
Yeah.
You'll see the main rosters here, and as you can see, there are some pretty cool. There's some heroes there that you might not really recognize. So you're just like, huh? Well, because that was current in 2000, I think 3 when this was done, 2004.
Hmm. But so what exactly is the setup for this? Is it? It's obviously a crossover event with Justice League and Avengers. Um, so, but what? I mean, give me a little bit of background here because I'm unfamiliar with it.
Sure. This is not like untread ground for Marvel and DC. They did some crossovers back in the 70s. They did something with like I think they had Superman and Spider-Man was one of the more famous ones, which I've never actually read. And I think there was one with Batman and the Incredible Hulk. That was back in the 70s when they were just like having fun. Um, then I think in the early 80s they did X-Men crossover with the Teen Titans.
Okay.
So it's not uncommon, although it's well, I mean, it is uncommon. I mean, when these things happen, it's maybe back then it was like 5 to 10 years of an interval. Like, well, essentially, like it kind of came to a head when they had a big Marvel versus DC crossover in the late 90s, wherein it was a bit more of a gimmick where they're just it was a big universal crisis where they put the heroes against each other, and then the readers could vote as to which hero would actually win in the battle. You know, like who, for example, who would
Hmm.
win if Batman fought Captain America? But this is not that. This is not that. This is actually a
Okay.
very well thought out love letter to the fans. That was kind of more of a cash grab, and maybe one day we'll actually even look at that. It led to the former uh the kind of cash grab one led to Amalgam Comics, which was a really kind of kooky but kind of semi cool um what if Marvel and DC's universes like collided and made one universe. And
Right.
that's really something kind of quirky
Hmm.
in like the history of US comics is like when Marvel and DC just mashed together and created Amalgam. This is not
Yeah.
that. Like I said, this is a really, really well thought out book in the vein of Crisis on Infinite Earths.
Yeah. Nice. How many issues is it?
It's only four prestige format issues. Um, and I'm showing you the spine here. But I mean, I'll give you a little sneak peek. It starts with, of course, a universe being destroyed by some malevolent force. Well, actually, two
Wow.
universes being destroyed. You'll even see a nice cameo appearance by uh the what was the name of Ultraman's team? Um, it's the kind of
Ultraman.
like the yeah. These are like the reverse. Oh, the Crime Syndicate. Yeah. So the Crime
Okay.
Syndicate makes a guest appearance here and gets, as you can see, leveled.
Hmm.
Wait. There's a delay, so it's hard for me to actually see which direction I'm pointing this book in. Um, but the cool part is that um the heroes, the two teams kind of slowly discover one another and kind of visit each other's earths. Um, and then they see what happens in each other's earths. So here's Batman kind of taking a look at what the Punisher is doing. These are little, and of course the Batman and the
Hmm.
Punisher have had a crossover too.
Yeah.
Later on.
Nice.
Um, Yeah, it's one of those really fun reads wherein you can't really take yourself seriously, but the book,
Mm,
as heroes do, they really do take it seriously.
yeah.
Um, and hopefully one of these times we'll actually get to you'll actually read this and we'll get to discuss this a little bit more because um it's one of those things that it's fun for any comics fan.
Yeah. So I'm assuming did it did very well, or was it is it one of those sort of hidden gems? Because again, I'm really unfamiliar with it. So I mean, how the fact that it was only 4 issues as well, so quite a short run.
Yeah, it was meant to be like just a self-contained story in itself. They could never really sustain uh having a crossover book between the universes, right? And it's very
Yeah.
popular here in the United States. I would say like anybody who frequents a comic shop will know this book.
Okay. Cool. Nice. I like that one. Um, I'll have to find out if I can sort of get hold of a collected edition of it. I'm pretty sure there'll be a trade paperback of it.
Yeah, but like I said, you might have better luck there in the UK. I've been having really a hard time finding a collected version of this here.
Oh, right. Okay. All right. Cool. We'll have to have a look at that one. So shall I get onto mine?
Yeah, yeah, go ahead.
Yep. So my first pickup for today is a manga which I recently picked up, and that is Caberos in the Silver Rain. So this is something that completely caught me off guard. Now, just to give a bit of backstory, so me and a friend of mine who is also a fellow YouTuber um, called BD Otoku, who does a lot of manga reviews, and we met through YouTube. He's another British manga tuber, and I mean, we've known each other for a couple of years, and then he came up to Birmingham about, I think it was a week before last, and we hung out. We did a bit of manga shopping. We went to a couple of comic stores here, and I came across this, and it was I very rarely blind buy any new series, let alone um, new sort of any kind of new literature. But certainly for comics and manga, I tend to do a bit of research before I buy, a new book. If it's a one-off, then I don't mind being a little bit more adventurous. But if it's a series, I generally don't. But this, I picked it up and I thought, now, when we did one of our first manga reviews for Spriggan, um, I think we both agreed that it was this really interesting mix of shonen action, along with sort of mysticism and ancient history, and just crazy action. And this kind of feels like a modern take on Spriggan. Um, and it's basically about a bunch of operatives um, who are basically like a special unit, like Spriggan, like the main character from Spriggan, but if you like, a team of these people, and they are tasked with protecting this mystical energy force that is all powerful and could be used for either for either powering civilization or as an all powerful weapon, and they call this psi, and this energy force is all. It's very mysterious. We don't actually find out what psi is, psi, in this first volume. But what this is basically like Spriggan, a mystery sci-fi action romp with these sort of special operatives. And what sold me on it was not actually the setup, because I thought, well, this is kind of Spriggan, but the artwork is really really eye catching actually. Um, so I can just show you some examples. Some of the character designs and sort of the backgrounds and the action sequences are just really really, really detailed and just well drawn. And I just thought it's one of the few examples of a manga that I picked up mainly for the artwork. I very rarely do that. I'm normally I need some indication that the story is going to be, sort of engaging as well, as opposed to just the art. But this one, I thought, you know what? I don't know if you have this in the US, but a lot of comic stores here have a 3 for 2 policy with manga. So you can buy 3 volumes of any series and you'll get the third one free. So this was my free volume because I didn't know what else to get. I was getting a couple of copies of.
We
I got that.
unfortunately do not have that.
No, well, this is like the trend in the UK now. So, you go to any comic or manga store, which are generally bunched together, and you'll get this 3 for 2 deal. And it's kind of how they get people to come and buy in bulk. And it works because I always do. I always end up coming home with about 6 books at least. Um, so I really enjoyed it. I read it over the bank holiday weekend here in the UK, and I had a really thoroughly enjoyable time with it. Yeah, it's definitely in the same vein as Spriggan. So if you like Spriggan, you are going to really enjoy this. It is. I don't know if it's necessarily a homage to that series, but it takes a lot of it. There are a lot of similarities, especially with the sort of the I want to say fantastical elements and the ancient history being sort of mixed up with sort of military action and sci-fi. Um, it's a very eclectic sort of book. It's a bit all over the place, but I had a great time with it, and for me, that's enough. So I'll continue the series definitely. This is the first volume. It's from a new publisher in the US called Alien Books. I think they've just started off this year, to my knowledge, but they're very new in the sort of the manga space, and this is one of their first titles. So I'm going to support them. I think this is a really fun title, and I would really recommend it for anybody who enjoys sort of a romp like Spriggan. So if that's your thing, definitely pick it up. It's worth your time, in my opinion, anyway.
Who's that? Who's that by?
Oh, and sorry, that's so it's written by Lyra Aikawa, and the art is by Berry Star. So I'm not familiar with these artists. It is that they are both Japanese artists and writers, but I'm unfamiliar with their previous work. This literally was a blind buy. I very rarely do this, if ever. So this really took me by surprise. So I thought it'd be a good one to talk about because maybe there are a lot of people who don't really know about this because I've not seen any reviews on YouTube. I haven't really seen any written reviews either, as such. So it's flown under the radar, or I'm not looking in the right places. But I think it's worth talking about because, again, if I hadn't just blind purchased it, I honestly would have passed it by, and I'm glad I didn't. So that's my first pick.
Okay, that sounds great. Okay, so my next oops, Luke has dropped his lightsaber,
Oh,
but it's
that
okay.
sucks.
So at the same time that I was picking up JLA Avengers, I also picked up the second volume of Love and Rockets, which I have never read.
Oh, nice,
Yeah,
nice.
yeah. And this is actually like you may remember when we did Love and Rockets before. Here's the first volume that we did,
Yeah.
Music for Mechanics by Fantagraphics Books. This is of course by the brothers Hernandez. Um, and I had always wanted to pick this up, and this was the first time that I was able to really get it. And I happened to just pick up. It's not exactly the mint copy, but this is the
Mm.
first edition of this collected volume of the second volume. So I was like, wow, okay, that's pretty cool.
Oh, damn. Yeah, that's a nice cover as well.
Yeah. So here, we've got some of the main characters. The main characters in the front, the continuing. Well, they're both continuing series, right? But essentially, like that's the front covers by Gilbert Hernandez, and then Jaime Hernandez does the characters on the back cover. And I'll just give you a little bit of. It starts off with Gilbert Hernandez's big kind of soap opera and characters here, and then we pick up with um, what's happening with Maggie. Maggie becomes a superhero in this one, apparently.
Cool.
Um, and
Does it
that's a
fo-
really cool one.
does it follow on from any of the story threads from the first volume, or is it all sort of
Yeah,
disconnected?
it's one of those things wherein you're it follows along with them and their lives and things like that. But then it keeps on that it keeps on that you don't know where you're gonna go in this universe, in this Love and Rockets universe. Like Gilbert Hernandez's stuff is very down to earth, kind of like one of those magical realism um kind of stories, wherein Jaime Hernandez's stories are like suddenly you're pretty much starting off in sci-fi, but then you're suddenly into comic book territory in this volume because like the main character becomes a superhero. And I'm just like it's just really fun to see where the imagination of the authors will take them and what kind of stories they will tell. It's not
Yeah,
it's not at all conventional. It's not at all predictable, but that's kind of like the really endearing trait of these books. And of course, like what we
yeah.
discussed before, uh, Jaime Hernandez still draws this, but his characters have aged through the years. So in its present incarnation, these characters have aged, and he still follows what they're doing.
I love that about the series. It also, it almost, it's on the one hand, it's really cool that they almost they're almost developing in real time, but that also makes it, given the history of this series, it also makes it quite intimidating for a new reader as like myself, where
Yeah,
there's so much to
yeah.
catch up on. But maybe as we looked at in our review, you can. Well, I'll put a link in the show notes. Because of the nature of the storytelling for Love and Rockets, I don't think you necessarily have to sort of read up on every issue or every collection, right?
No, you don't. You can really just. I mean, I follow along, especially if I get a glimpse of like the present iteration of Love and Rockets. I still just get captivated by the art, um, and the layouts and the style and progression of what Jaime is doing, because I'm just like, man, to have your style kind of progress from this point to the next point. As somebody who loves comic art, I really really love being able to do that and follow what like an artist's career and say like, wow, this is what he's doing with the characters now, and this is how his art has evolved and how his thinking has evolved. um
Yeah.
you kind of feel like, and that's why I picked this up. I picked this up because I really just wanted to keep going and follow that type
Mm,
of progression with the brothers Hernandez.
yeah.
And that's my second pick. That's my last pick
Well,
for today.
well, before we move on, do you plan? So I've noticed, obviously, those are some of the early editions of the of the book. Are you interested in getting some of the newer collected editions, which I think they were released not too long ago, maybe a couple of years old now. But I'm sure there are multiple editions. But the hardcover editions that I'm referring to.
Yeah, it would have to be uh an exercise in am I getting the right collection? Because sometimes I'm not really sure with Love and Rockets how they've collected it. Like it seems safe to me that I'm getting the older ones because they follow the same collection structure, and I'm not skipping any issues or anything like that, or getting too much of in one volume.
Yeah. And remind
But
me, what publication were they originally produced in, or rather published in?
the original ones were produced like as separate kind of zines or magazines, right? And then they were collected by Fantagraphics.
Okay,
And I'm not sure
cool.
if it's the same publisher that does them now. As I said, this one that I just picked up is by Fantagraphics Books, and this is
Yeah.
just like this was just facing out on one of the shelves, and I just went like, "Whoa, okay, it's the second volume. I've never actually seen it."
Mm,
And so I was just like, okay, pick this up. It wasn't badly priced, so I was like, yeah, this is good.
yeah. That's nice. Cool. All right. Um, well, my final pick is a bit of a biggie because it's one that we've been talking about off camera for several weeks now, and I couldn't stop talking about it, and it's an important one for me to bring up now, given that this particular era has now officially come to a close, and that is the current and now finally ended era of X-Men. So this is the Krakoa era of X-Men, where this I believe this was in the early. I want to say um, I think it was 2018. Might have been way before that as well, even or 2016 even. But this was the book that started off the current run of X Men, written by none other than Jonathan Hickman and a couple of artists, Pepe Larraz and R.B. Silver. Um, so this is this is the first book that kicked off that this particular era of the X Men, which is House of X, Powers of Ten, and I've got to say, this really sort of turned the tables for me. I've always been a fan of X Men, but for me, my love of X Men came from the old '90s TV series. I wasn't reading the X Men comics. I missed the sort of Chris Claremont era, which everybody hails and which I absolutely intend on going back to. But I thought for me to go to to read up on the X Men and start a run that is fairly modern, but also very sort of radical and different. Um, I was always sort of pointed in the direction of the Krakoa era, which is and that's just now come to a close. I believe this summer the X Men are going to be officially rebooted again. I don't know what the series is called, but this appears to be what's planned ahead. Um, but this particular book was really uh, just from start to finish intriguing. That's the best way I can describe it. The story beats are so out there and so different to what you would expect from an X-Men story, because unlike the original X-Men, where when I say original, as in the Silver Age, and I'm assuming even before that, um, the X-Men were always seen as a almost a parallel between sort of minorities in America, and in this case, mutants were seen as sort of the new threat to humanity and seen as something too different to be integrated within society. And you had these two main leaders who, as I understand, were parallels between Malcolm X as Magneto, in this case Magneto, and then Professor X, Martin Luther King. So there were a lot of parallels between sort of the civil rights, the American civil rights movement, in the 50s and 60s, but certainly the 60s, and I always gravitated to the X-Men because of that, and I always felt that political edginess to it all, the if you like, the tension that you can feel within these stories was very real and very relevant, and still is today. And unlike those stories, though, in this case, the mutants are clearly the dominant species here. They are not, if you like, at the mercy of humanity. Rather, they're at the mercy of their own, I suppose, their own status in the world, which is as almost demigods. They've reached a point now where humanity can't really, using traditional means, um, sort of be the higher power here. They have to accept that mutants are the ones who are calling the shots. And because of that, a lot of intrigue occurs, and governments decide to band together and come up with new plans to overcome the mutant threat. And it's all very very epic. It spans generations and different timelines, and there's just so much packed into this book. There's so much as a start to the story, um, and to this particular era. It just has everything to get you completely invested. Now, I have heard that later episodes, which they aren't necessarily written by Hickman, but there are many other writers and artists who have sort of jumped in and taken over certain stories within this Krakoa era, and I've heard mixed things about them. But regardless of that, the general premise, the initial setup, is so good in this book that I had to go and get more. I flew through this, and I would happily reread it. There are a lot of, I mean, the principal characters are sort of the X Men that we all know and love, if you're familiar with the X Men, but they all have an edginess to them that you wouldn't necessarily expect in a Marvel book. There's a maturity to the story. There's a complexity to the characterization that really puts it above um, a lot of other material that I've read. Um, and I have to say that it really is an absolute trip. I loved this book. Um, if I had to choose one of my favorite reads of this year so far, this is going to be it. It just got me from start to finish, and I'm going to move on to look at I've got Jonathan Hickman's X-Men collected edition, which has further stories after House of X, Powers of 10, and then I've also gone on to collect. Um, Excalibur and Swords of X, which again are within this particular era of the X Men, the Krakoa era. But yeah, I mean, it really, I mean, it's one of those things where I would love to do an episode with you about this particular book, because there's so much I could say about it, and a lot of it I think requires sort of the other person to have read it, so we could really get into some of the details of the story and the characters and the artwork. But um, I'm so excited to have him finally come back to the X-Men, who have always been my favorite sort of Marvel characters in general. Um, and I think my favorite Marvel character is Captain America, but and anything he's featured in. But as a group, as a franchise, it's the X-Men that has always brought me back to Marvel. Um, do you know anything about this story? Because I mean, I know
Yeah, I've
you are
actually been
aware of it.
following it, but not reading it. Kind of like they'll
Yeah,
have little snippets of it in some of the popular sites, popular internet sites of what's happening with the X-Men. And as an
yeah,
X-Men fan, I'm just like, okay, I'll read this. So I know the general gist and setup. Um,
yeah.
and kind of like what's been happening lately as well to kind of, but I would love to kind of be able to have the time to catch up on this because um most of what I know, most of what I've read from the X-Men are from the Chris Claremont days,
Yeah.
and it would be great to kind of see how. I mean, I already know the general gist, and it intrigues me. So yeah, it would be
Mm,
great to kind of, first off catch up on this and then be able to discuss it in further.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, I would honestly say that House of X Powers of Ten can stand on its own because it does set up the Krakoa era in the sense that the X Men now have their own nation, and that perhaps is the biggest twist. Not a twist in the sense that I've spoilt anything because it's on the front cover. It is the most important story beat that now the mutants are not a sort of a group of people who are looking for a home or seeking acceptance. No, this is almost as if now we've got the flip side where the mutants have an established home, an established nation, even, and all the politics that result from that new angle of power whereby imagine these obviously enhanced human beings who now have their own nation together. That kind of power sends shockwaves across the world's governments, and it's a very intriguing story. It isn't just about discrimination, or it isn't just about the plight of mutants. It's very much about what happens when so many of these powerful individuals, good and bad, by the way. That's what the other really interesting angle is about the story. That they're all mutants, and according to Xavier, they're all welcome to move to Krakoa as a right, as a birthright, as a mutant. It almost has parallels between sort of Israel in the sense and the conflict there now with Palestine, there's a lot of and it's not just that. It is not it transcends any kind of global conflict or modern or sort of real life global conflict. It is very much about a character study of what does a what how does a mutant view themselves in terms of identity when they are given identity as opposed to a label, you're a mutant. you know um, it's very powerful, and we really should do an episode on it, and I can't wait to read more, to be honest. But that was a great start. So that was
Okay,
my
yeah, that sounds good.
my second pick.
Yeah, that'll kind of wrap us up for today. It's a
Yeah, bit of a short
it's a
one.
relatively
Yeah,
short one, especially after the editing is done. But um,
yeah.
yeah, we just wanted to kind of um do an episode before we kind of lapse into not doing anything.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
um,
yeah.
but yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Please like and subscribe. It helps. It helps our channel out. It helps us grow.
Absolutely, and definitely leave a comment below as well, if you've heard of any of these books, you've read them, and any recommendations you have. Like, for example, the Krakoa era of X-Men. Let us know what your favorite runs are within that particular era. I'd be really interested to know, and it'll definitely feed into our future reviews. So. But I think that will about do it for today. Thank you all for watching, and we'll be back very soon with our reviews and our pickups. So until then, take care, and we will catch up with you very soon.
Okay, ta ta.